The charity gala at the Hotel Harrington glittered with chandeliers and the soft roar of idle gossip. At the Vance family table, Richard was already performing for his small audience.
To Pamela, who noodles on the piano and occasionally remembers the melody.
Vanessa laughed with practiced condescension, tipping her champagne glass toward him. Richard beamed, enjoying the ripple of amusement around the table.
I am afraid I'll have to excuse myself early this evening.
Off to that little recital you mentioned.
Darling, it's not a real concert, is it? No one will notice if you are late.
Little recital. They'll find out soon enough.
Pamela rose without haste, placed her napkin beside her plate, and walked away, her back straight. The family assumed she was simply slipping out early, too embarrassed to stay after the mockery.
She's a lifelong beginner. The poor thing clings to that little hobby like a child.
All that potential wasted. She could have done something practical.
The table laughed again, then subsided into smug satisfaction.
At least we'll hear real musicians tonight.
She could never achieve that. Her noodling is fine for a living room, not a stage.
Chloe opened the gala program, but said nothing, her silence growing heavier.
They don't know the first thing about her. Why do they always talk like she's invisible?
A soft chime rang through the ballroom, and the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the performance was about to begin.
Finally, some culture for an actual cause.
The family sat back, smug and oblivious, waiting for the hired orchestra, unaware of the storm about to break over their table. As the family signaled the waiter for another bottle, Pamela slipped through a side door into the backstage corridor. A stage manager in black greeted her with a clipboard and the kind of bow one gives a celebrated artist. He held out a slender black baton, its surface gleaming under the low light.
They think they know me. In a few minutes, the whole room will learn otherwise.
Another round. We have a long evening of culture ahead.
We should leave right after the first piece. Beat the traffic.
Something feels off tonight. Why did Aunt Pamela really leave?
Noodling. They'll never use that word again.
After this, we can plan the ski trip without her and her piano fantasies.
Pamela adjusted her cuff, the baton held lightly, as her family clinked glasses over plans that would soon dissolve. The program lay open before Chloe, a quiet piece of evidence. She turned the page and froze.
Composer and conductor, Pamela Vance. That's Aunt Pamela. It can't be a coincidence.
She looked up, heart pounding, and pushed the program toward Vanessa.
Look at this. It says Pamela Vance is the conductor.
That's not our Pamela. She's a hobbyist who can barely finish a Chopin prelude. Probably some other lady with the same name.
Chloe turned to Richard, who was swirling his drink.
Enough, Chloe. Stop trying to make her into something she's not. Put that away.
Why won't they even look? If I am wrong, what's the harm in checking?
She pulled the program back, her jaw set. The name remained printed there, undeniable. The orchestra filed onto the stage, and the family settled in for the performance, still joking about traffic and ski trips. The orchestra members took their places, instruments gleaming, and a reverent silence descended.
Now these are real musicians, not someone plinking away in the corner.
She could have taken lessons, but she never had the discipline. This takes years of training.
They have no idea. The program doesn't lie. It's right here in my hands.
The lights dimmed almost to darkness, leaving only the stage glowing like a jewel.
Finally, some proper music. Let's hope it's not too long.
The violin section raised their bows in perfect unison, awaiting the downbeat.
See, Chloe, that's what real musicians look like, not your aunt tinkering on a keyboard.
I should say something, but they'll just laugh again.
A heavy hush fell over the ballroom, thick with expectation. The family settled into their chairs, entirely unprepared for what was about to be announced. Chloe's phone glowed under the table as she navigated to the gala's official site. Maestra Pamela Vance, composer and conductor, premiering her own work this evening. She pushed the phone toward Vanessa, the image undeniable.
I told you, it's a misunderstanding. Put that away before someone sees you acting foolish.
It's her photo. Look at her eyes. That's Aunt Pamela.
There are plenty of women named Pamela. Your aunt couldn't lead a choir, let alone an orchestra.
Richard didn't even look up from his drink when Chloe turned his way.
Enough, Chloe. I said drop it. Real musicians are about to play, and I don't want your nonsense spoiling it.
She pulled the phone back, its screen dimming, as a cold stone settled in her stomach. The family resumed their small talk about ski lodges, the truth lying ignored in her palm. The announcer, a striking woman in a floor-length gown, stepped to the podium under a single spotlight.
Good evening and welcome to the annual Harrington Charity Gala.
I hope this conductor is worth the wait.
Anyone would seem impressive after our sister's little hobby.
Tonight, we premiere a new work composed specially for this evening.
It's her. The program is right. They'll have to believe it soon.
The composer is a hidden gem, a woman whose artistry has shaped countless lives. You may think you know her, but tonight, you will see her as she truly is.
She paused, letting the silence stretch. The audience caught between curiosity and impatience. The spotlight swept toward the stage wings, and the room held its breath, the name about to be spoken.
This composer has dedicated her life to music, yet many of you may not recognize her name. She has been called a hobbyist, but tonight, she claims her place on this stage.
Vanessa twitched, the word hobbyist landing too close to her own mockery.
Sounds like quite the underdog. Good for her. Let's hope her music isn't dreary.
Chloe barely breathed, her hands clenched around the program, the edges digging into her palms.
Her work has been performed in concert halls across Europe, but never in her hometown until this very evening. She also founded a children's music program that teaches over 300 students annually.
The details settled over the table like a mirror held up too late. Vanessa's smile tightened into a thin line.
Must be a different Pamela. Our Pamela couldn't organize a bake sale, let alone a children's program.
The announcer raised a hand, and the entire room leaned forward. The final reveal only seconds away.
It is my great honor to introduce the composer and conductor of tonight's world premiere.
The words hung in the air, and the whole ballroom seemed to lean in tighter. A sharp spotlight swept left and landed on the wings, a single shaft of light cutting the dark. In the shadows, Pamela stood, baton in hand, her posture absolute.
Now they'll see. No more noodling, no more little recital.
This woman's music has crossed oceans, yet she has remained unseen in her own city.
At the table, Vanessa's champagne glass hung mid-air, her fingers suddenly uncertain. Chloe pressed her lips together, her eyes fixed on the stage wing. The announcer's lips parted. The name caught behind her teeth. The announcer drew one last breath, the name poised like a secret about to break.
Maestra, Pamela Vance.
The name detonated across the hall. A collective gasp, then a wave of applause crashing against the walls. Richard's whiskey glass slipped, shattered on the floor, the sound swallowed by the escalating roar. Vanessa's champagne glass tipped, spilling across the white linen as her mouth opened without sound.
I knew it. She's the one.
Pamela emerged from the wings, her stride measured, the baton an extension of her arm. The orchestra members rose slightly in their seats, a reflex of respect, as she approached the podium. 200 guests stood, clapping with a fervor that shook the chandeliers. But at the Vance table, no one moved. The family sat encased in a mortified stillness. Pamela raised the baton, and the hall fell silent. A kingdom recognizing its sovereign, the baton descended, and the first chord struck the hall like a heartbeat. Pamela's hands sculpted the air, pulling sound from 60 musicians with the precision of a master. The music was dense and defiant, a roar of brass layered over shimmering strings, nothing like a hobbyist's noodle. At the table, Richard's knuckles turned white against the cloth, his face a fixed mask of denial. Vanessa pressed a hand to her mouth, a film of tears glossing her eyes, unspilled and burning.
She wrote this. All those years they called it a hobby, and she was building this.
The orchestra surged into a second movement, darker, richer, silencing any whisper of amateur. No one at the family table moved. They sat like effigies, frozen amid the invisible tide of the music. Vanessa's breath came in shallow pulls. A tear slid down her cheek, catching the low light. Each note pressed forward, a quiet indictment of every dismissive word they had ever spoken. The word noodling rose from memory like a splinter, its echo sharper now against the sweeping violins. Little recital. The phrase played over in Vanessa's mind, each repeat cutting deeper. Richard sank lower in his chair, his earlier smirk a ghost that haunted his rigid jaw. Vanessa fought the tears blurring her vision, but the music refused to let her look away from the truth. Chloe sat forward, tears of a different kind on her cheeks, ones of vindication. The strings climbed to a fever pitch, bows flurrying in wild unison, then the brass joined like a verdict. Pamela's baton cut the air sharply, her silhouette commanding as the orchestra drove toward the final bar. A thunder of timpani rolled, and then, with a final snap of her wrist, the music ceased. Absolute silence swallowed the hall. No one breathed. No one clapped. At the table, the family was a study in white faces and held breath, their guilt hanging in the stillness. The silence broke. A single clap sparked, and the room erupted into a standing ovation. 200 guests rose, chairs scraping, applause thundering against the walls. At the family table, no one moved. Heads low, they were frozen islands in a sea of acclaim. Pamela turned and bowed, the baton still in her hand, her face composed. An assistant handed her ivory roses. She held them as the crowd's roar peaked.
Extraordinary. Thank you, Maestra Pamela.
The host returned to the podium, smiling, calming the room with a raised hand. Chloe slowly stood, her applause joining the halls though her parents stayed seated. Richard's hands remained flat on the table, but his eyes were cracked with shame. The ovation subsided. The host leaned into the microphone, signaling something more.
We must extend our gratitude to Maestra Pamela for another reason. She has donated tonight's entire proceeds to the children's music program she founded a decade ago.
A fresh wave of applause surged, sharper now, laced with admiration and disbelief. Vanessa's face went slack, her eyes darting to Richard, then to Chloe. Richard's hand curled around the edge of the table, knuckles white, his jaw set like stone. The family exchanged bewildered looks, the weight of their ignorance pressing down like a physical force.
A whole program. Hundreds of kids. And they called it a hobby.
Pamela, still on stage, handed the roses to the host and stepped back, her gaze distant. A muscle in Vanessa's jaw twitched. She looked as if the floor had been pulled from under her. The applause died down, but the silence at the Vance table only deepened. Richard covered his face with both hands, his shoulders curling inward as if to shield himself from the room.
We need to leave. Now, before this gets worse.
Her whisper was tense. A bird trapped against glass. Richard didn't answer.
Number. If we leave, it'll only look worse. We have to stay and face whatever she says.
Richard's hands fell from his face, but his gaze stayed locked on the shattered glass at his feet. Around them, guests began to mingle, their laughter a cruel contrast to the family's paralysis. Vanessa grabbed her purse, but her legs wouldn't move. She was rooted by a shame deeper than fear.
They're terrified. Good. Maybe now they'll understand what they did.
The minutes stretched. Each second was a verdict, and they couldn't hand in their plea. They were trapped by their own words, bound to the chairs they had laughed from an hour ago. Across the room, Pamela detached herself from the last well-wisher, her polite smile dissolving as she turned toward the Vance table. She walked slowly, each step measured, the baton still in her hand like a scepter. Richard straightened in his chair, the color draining from his face.
She's coming. Richard, say something. Don't just sit there.
But Richard's mouth opened and closed without sound, his courage evaporated.
Finally. She's not running. She's walking straight to us.
Vanessa's hand shot out, gripping Richard's arm, her knuckles white against the dark fabric. Richard finally lifted his gaze, meeting the sight of his sister-in-law advancing like a reckoning. The crowd seemed to part for her, the murmur dying as she neared the table. She stopped at the edge of the table, her expression unreadable, the baton now resting lightly against her thigh. Richard's mouth opened, a cracked whisper escaping before he could stop it. Pamela, we didn't. She raised a hand, a simple gesture that severed his sentence like a knife. Silently, She laid the baton on the white tablecloth, its weight settling like a verdict. All eyes at the table fell to the slender stick of wood, then slowly lifted to her face.
Did anyone enjoy the noodling?
The silence that followed was a living thing, pressing down on every chest at the table. Richard's eyes stayed locked on the shattered glass at his feet, his throat working but producing only a dry click. Vanessa pressed a fist to her mouth, a single tear sliding over her knuckles, but she made no sound. Chloe stared at the baton, her earlier fire extinguished, unable to bridge the chasm her family had dug. No one answered. The question hung in the air, an indictment more complete than any applause. The silence stretched, a dense fog that refused to lift from the table. Then Pamela's hand closed around the baton again, its lightness now heavy with everything unsaid. She turned, and her gaze found Chloe. A single nod, nothing more, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unheard conversations.
She saw me. Even now, in all this wreckage, she saw me.
Without another word, Pamela turned and walked away from the table, her back a straight line of finality. Richard lifted his head, watching her go with a hollowed expression, as if seeing a stranger for the first time. Vanessa's hand fell from her mouth, revealing a face smeared with ruined makeup and unuttered apologies. Nearby guests glanced over, their expressions puzzled, but no one intervened in the private wreckage. Pamela moved through the crowd, which parted for her again, this time in an awed, almost reverent silence. The family remained frozen, the baton lying on the white cloth like a signature on a verdict they had authored themselves. The silence stretched until Vanessa's voice broke through, a threadbare whisper.
We should have listened. All this time. I treated her like a child with crayons.
She pressed a fist to her mouth, the words tasting like ash. Richard's hand moved toward the baton, his fingers trembling as he lifted the slender piece of wood from the white cloth. He turned it over, staring at the engraved signature on its shaft, a name he'd dismissed for years as the title of a hobby.
Maestra Pamela Vance. I never once asked her what she did.
She's been doing this for years. You just never asked.
Chloe's voice was quiet, not accusatory, just tired. Richard's jaw tightened, but no defense came. The baton rested in his palm, its weight holding every note she had ever written. And at the table, the family remained, trapped in the quiet aftermath of their own making. The ballroom surged with chatter and motion, but the Vance table remained a still point, an island of stillness in a sea of celebration. From the stage, the empty orchestra seats stretched toward them, a spotlight illuminating the baton still lying on their table. Chloe watched the door where Pamela had disappeared, a bittersweet smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. Pamela stepped through the ballroom exit, her silhouette sharp against the hallway light, and vanished from their sight. Behind her, the crowd still buzzed with her name, but she walked on, head high, unburdened. Her face, caught in a passing glow, held no anger, only the quiet composure of a truth finally recognized. Inside, the gala moved on. But at the Vance table, time had stopped, each second an echo of the mockery that had filled the air an hour before. The baton lay on the white cloth, a slender monument to everything they had dismissed. Richard still held it, his thumb tracing the engraved name, as if reading a sentence he'd never been given. And in the distance, the woman they had called a hobbyist was already stepping into a night that had finally learned her name. The baton lay where she had placed it, a line of polished wood against the crumpled white linen. A stray gleam caught its engraved signature, turning the name into a quiet accusation. Richard's hand moved forward, trembling, as if drawn by the gravity of what he had ignored. His shadow fell over the baton, its slender form untouched by the hesitation of his fingers. He traced the air above it, never quite closing the distance. Then his palm settled flat beside it, the baton still undisturbed. He withdrew, the wooden stick remaining a silent sentinel on the cloth. The baton did not move. It never had to. In the hush of the emptying ballroom, it simply waited. A final light caught its tip before the fade, and then the image dissolved into black, leaving only the echo of a name now known. From the black, a figure emerged, a woman walking through the bright corridor of the hotel exit, head high. The crowd's applause was behind her now, but the echoes of her music still clung to the chandeliers. She did not look back. She did not need to. The truth was no longer hidden. It had flooded the entire hall. Her face, caught in a warm halo of light, held the serenity of someone who had been seen at last. For years, her family had called it a hobby. A word small enough to dismiss a world. But a hobby doesn't write symphonies. A hobby doesn't teach 300 children. A hobby doesn't command a standing ovation. The baton she left behind was more than wood. It was a key to a door they had never bothered to open. As she stepped into the night, the cool air carrying the last strains of her composition, she knew. Some hobbies don't play for applause. They build worlds the scoffers will never enter. And with that, Maestra Pamela Vance vanished into the lights of the city, her music already outliving the silence of their table.